The air thrummed with the joyous cacophony of tens of thousands, a symphony of cheers, boos, and the distant, rhythmic thump of a bludger being smacked across the pitch. 5 years. 5 years since the Battle of Hogwarts, since the world held its breath, since Harry Potter, the boy who lived, had finally lived up to the impossible legend. Now, at 22, he stood on the precipice of a new kind of normal, a comfortable, if somewhat jaded, Auror, still celebrated, still respected, but feeling the quiet hum of routine settle in. The Quidditch World Cup was meant to be a reprieve. A colossal stadium, magically expanded and hidden within the desolate fields of Dartmoor, England, glittered under protective enchantments. Banners depicting the Irish shamrock and the Bulgarian lion fluttered side by side, the scent of sizzling sausages and frothy butterbeer mingling with the earthy tang of the moorland. Harry leaned against the railing of the ministry box, a half-eaten pumpkin pasty forgotten in his hand. Below, speck-like figures zipped through the sky, chasing the elusive snitch, but his gaze was distant, a faint smile playing on his lips. Ron was somewhere in the stands, probably shouting himself hoarse, while Hermione, likely nestled in a quiet corner of the VIP lounge, was dissecting the intricacies of international Quidditch law. Life, for once, felt blessedly predictable. Then, the sky began to bleed. It wasn't a gradual shift, not a darkening of clouds, but a violent bruise spreading from the horizon, a sickly green and bruised purple that swallowed the setting sun. A hush fell over the stadium, a strange, unnatural quiet that prickled the skin more than the loudest roar. Wizards glanced up, wands already in hand, but the protective dome above them, usually an unyielding shield against the elements, shimmered with an eerie iridescence, as if struggling to contain something immense. Odd, Harry murmured, his hand instinctively going to his own wand, a familiar weight in his pocket. He'd seen plenty of magical storms, Dementor-induced fogs, and even a rogue weather charm or two, but this felt different. Primal. Malevolent. A low growl, deeper than any thunder, vibrated through his bones, rattling the very stands. The stadium lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like frightened phantoms. The protective dome above them strained, cracks of golden energy spiderwebbing across its surface, then healing, only to crack again. Panic, a subtle ripple at first, began to spread. People shuffled, whispered, their eyes wide with growing unease. And then it descended. Not from the edge of the sky, but from within the storm itself, ripping through the bruised purple clouds like a golden spear. A monstrous head, serpentine and scaled, emerged first, eyes like molten gold burning with an ancient, terrifying intelligence. Then another, identical, curling gracefully into view. And finally, a third, equally majestic, equally horrifying. King Ghidorah. The name, ancient and whispered in hushed tones even among the most seasoned Aurors, ripped through Harry's mind like a physical blow. He'd seen blurry images in restricted ministry archives, heard the legends of a golden demise, but nothing, no ancient drawing or terrified testimony, could prepare him for the sheer, impossible majesty of it. 3 titanic heads, each crowned with a jagged horn, twisted and reared atop serpentine necks. Its body, a shimmering tapestry of golden scales, seemed to drink the light, radiating an aura of terrifying power. 2 vast, leathery wings, spanning what felt like miles, unfurled, blotting out the entirety of the bruised sky, casting the entire stadium into an unnatural gloom. Lightning, not mere atmospheric discharge, but golden, crackling energy, snaked across its scales, arcing from its 3 gaping mouths to strike the protective dome with concussive force. The dome didn't just crack, it shattered. A deafening roar, a chorus of 3 voices that tore at the very fabric of reality, ripped through the air. The sound wave alone was enough to send thousands tumbling from their seats. Debris rained down, splinters of wood, twisted metal, chunks of concrete. The stadium, once a bastion of magical strength, buckled and groaned under the assault. Harry felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. Auror training kicked in. Everyone, apparate. Get out now, he bellowed, his voice straining against the roar. He pulled out his wand, instinctually raising it. Protego Maxima. He poured every ounce of his will, every memory of desperate duels and overwhelming odds, into the shield charm. A shimmering, translucent barrier erupted from his wand tip, but it felt weak, flimsy. It wavered, straining against the unseen force emanating from the colossal beast. Ghidorah's central head lowered, its molten eyes fixing on the sprawling, panicked stadium. A single, focused beam of golden lightning, impossibly bright, impossibly potent, shot forth. It struck the ground near the center of the pitch, not with an explosion of light, but with a horrifying, soundless implosion of reality. The earth buckled, a crater of black, smoking ruin appearing instantly where moments before a perfectly manicured lawn had been. Panic escalated to absolute pandemonium. Wails of terror, screams for help, the desperate, unthinking surge of 250,000 people trying to flee at once. Harry saw a witch try to apparate. Her body flickered, distorted, then snapped back, gasping, disoriented. Another tried to summon a portkey, only for the glowing object to fizzle into dust. His own Protego Maxima flickered, then vanished. No, not vanished. It collapsed. It felt like a solid punch to his magical core, leaving him winded and disoriented. His wand tip sparked weakly, as if protesting the exertion. What was that? He gasped, his heart hammering against his ribs. He tried another spell, a simple Wingardium Leviosa to lift a heavy beam off a trapped family. His wand glowed faintly, a pathetic wisp of red light, and the beam remained stubbornly in place. It hit him then, a cold, crushing realization. His magic wasn't just weakened, it was scrambled. Like a powerful jamming signal, Ghidorah's very presence, the crackling golden lightning that laced its body, was disrupting the fundamental flow of magic. Spells were failing, apparition was impossible, protective charms were crumbling like dry leaves. This wasn't a wizard. This wasn't Voldemort, with his carefully constructed dark magic, his Horcruxes, his cunning plans. This was something else entirely. Something ancient, elemental, a force of nature that rendered their carefully honed abilities utterly useless. Move. Everyone move. Harry yelled, abandoning his failed magical attempts. He shoved a young wizard out of the path of falling debris, then sprinted towards a collapsing section of the stands where he'd seen a flash of red hair that might have been Ron. He didn't think about his wand. It felt like a useless stick in his hand. He was just a man now, in a sea of terrified people, with an impossible monster destroying everything he knew. Ghidorah let out another triplet roar, a sound of pure, untamed power. Its massive wings beat slowly, creating hurricane-force winds that ripped through the stadium, tearing away entire sections of stands, sending people, debris, and even a discarded broomstick spiraling into the poisoned sky. More golden lightning lashed out, striking the remaining stadium structures, turning them into molten slag. The air itself crackled with static, making his teeth ache, the hairs on his arms standing on end. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Buildings, people, the very land, everything was insignificant. The Statute of Secrecy, a magical law upheld for centuries with meticulous care, was being irrevocably shattered with every golden flash, every shattering roar. Muggles in surrounding towns would see this. They would hear. They would know. Harry ducked under a toppling pillar, his mind racing, trying to find an angle, a weakness, anything. But there was nothing. No hex, no jinx, no counterspell he had ever learned would even scratch this titan. He was the boy who lived, the vanquisher of the darkest wizard in history, and he felt utterly, hopelessly outmatched. His confidence, a quiet, steady flame that had burned for years, flickered, then guttered. This was a war he hadn't trained for, a battle where his most powerful weapon was nothing more than a broken twig. He looked up again, his face grim, covered in dust and sweat. Ghidorah hovered majestically, a living apocalypse, its three heads surveying the devastation with an almost casual indifference. Dartmoor, the stadium, the very notion of a safe wizarding world, was being erased. What do you do when the world's greatest hero suddenly finds his greatest strength turned to ash? What do you do when faced with something that doesn't just overpower your magic, but nullifies it? Harry had no answers, only the cold, hard certainty that this was only the beginning. He was alive, yes, but for the first time in a very long time, he felt utterly, terrifyingly vulnerable. And the golden glow of the three-headed monster in the sky seemed to mock his every magical triumph. The ground still trembled, not from apparition's customary lurch, but from the raw, unadulterated power of King Ghidorah's departure. The air crackled with a dying energy, a static charge that prickled Harry's skin and made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Around him, the remnants of the Quidditch World Cup stadium were a testament to annihilation. Twisted metal, shattered magical constructs, and the acrid smell of ozone and burnt earth hung heavy in the air. Panic, a visceral, animalistic thing, still rippled through the disoriented wizards and witches, though many were simply stunned into silence, staring blankly at the ruined sky. Harry stood amidst it all, his wand still clutched in his hand, though it felt less like a tool of power and more like a useless stick of wood. He tried a simple Lumos. The tip of his wand flickered weakly, spitting a few defiant sparks before dying out, the light less bright than a dying ember. He tried an Accio for a dislodged spectator's glasses, and felt only a strange, dull pull, the spell collapsing before it could take hold. It was like trying to breathe underwater. The fundamental laws of his world had been inverted. Harry! Hermione, her face streaked with dirt and fear, stumbled towards him, her own wand held tight, though she wasn't trying to cast. Her eyes, usually sparkling with intellectual curiosity, were wide with a terror Harry hadn't seen since the darkest days of the war. It's gone, for now, she gasped, collapsing beside him, peering around at the devastation. But the magic, it's broken, isn't it? Harry nodded, his throat tight. Couldn't get a single coherent spell off. It was like trying to speak in a hurricane. Everything just scattered. He swept his hand across the landscape, encompassing the silent, bewildered ministry officials who were trying to coordinate rescue efforts with non-existent communication charms, the healers struggling with muggles who had witnessed unthinkable horrors, and the general sense of impotent dread. This isn't like anything we've ever faced, Hermione. No, she agreed, already pulling a small, battered leather-bound book from her charmed handbag, a habit he found both comforting and ironically futile in their current predicament. I was trying to sense the residual magical signature. It's not just a dampening field, Harry. It's like the very frequency of magic itself was disrupted. Ghidorah's lightning, it wasn't just physical force. It was an energetic countercurrent. Like trying to tune a radio to a station that's being actively jammed by a stronger signal. Harry frowned, trying to wrap his head around it. So, it wasn't that we weren't powerful enough. It was that our power couldn't even form. Precisely, Hermione confirmed, snapping the book shut with a frustrated sigh. And nothing in any of our texts covers anything like this. This creature, it's outside the known magical paradigm. It's as if it operates on an entirely different plane of existence, and our magic simply can't interface with it. The implications were chilling. For their entire lives, magic had been their answer, their shield, their weapon. To have it rendered moot, utterly useless in the face of such a threat, left them profoundly vulnerable. Harry, the boy who lived, the vanquisher of Voldemort, felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. All his years of training, all his heroic deeds, meant nothing against this. We need answers, Hermione, Harry said, forcing a steely resolve into his voice. If this thing comes back, and we can't fight it, then it's over. Not just for us, but for the Statute of Secrecy, for the world as we know it. As if on cue, a ministry envoy, looking harried and pale, arrived, pushing through the stunned crowd. Potter, Granger, Minister Shacklebolt requires your immediate presence. And he's sent someone to brief you. Someone from the Department of Mysteries. Harry and Hermione exchanged a look. The Department of Mysteries. The last place you went for mundane information. They followed the envoy through the wreckage, past weeping families and frantic Aurors, until they reached a hastily erected protective bubble, the last remaining fragment of stable magic, barely holding, powered by several straining wizards. Inside, Minister Shacklebolt stood, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a haggard exhaustion. Beside him, however, stood a woman Harry had never seen before. She was tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold an ancient wisdom. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her ministry robes were an unusual shade of deep amethyst, subtly embroidered with constellations. She carried herself with an almost unnerving serenity, as if the chaos raging outside didn't touch her. This was Elara Vance. "Harry, Hermione," Shacklebolt began, his voice raspy. "This is Elara Vance. She's provided some startling insights into our current predicament." He gestured vaguely at the sky, where remnants of Ghidorah's storm clouds still lingered, bruised and heavy. Elara's gaze was direct, piercing, as she assessed them. "Potter, Granger, your reputation precedes you. Good. We will need clarity of thought." Her voice was low, melodic, and precise, each word carefully chosen. "Minister Shacklebolt has informed you of the magical disruption? It's unprecedented," Hermione stated, ever keen to jump to the facts. "Our magic is effectively nullified within a significant radius of that creature." "Why?" Elara nodded slowly. "Precisely. And why, I believe, is the crucial question. King Ghidorah is not a magical entity in the traditional sense, as you correctly surmised, Granger. It is a cosmic being, a conductor of atmospheric energy on a scale unfathomable to wizarding science. Its lightning isn't merely a destructive force, it's an emanated energy field that operates on frequencies utterly alien to our magical resonance. Think of it as a disruptive harmonic. Our spells are not being blocked, they are being overridden, their fundamental structure destabilized at the point of casting." Harry felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Cosmic? What does that even mean?" "It means it originates from beyond our world, beyond our understanding of natural magic," Elara explained, her eyes sweeping over them. Ancient texts, preserved in the deepest vaults of the Department of Mysteries, refer to such entities as titans or kaiju. Ghidorah, in particular, is dubbed the Golden Demise, or the Destroyer of Worlds. It feeds on planetary energy, particularly atmospheric electricity, and its arrival always heralds an epoch of profound change and destruction. Hermione's mind was clearly racing. So, it's not just a beast, it's a living storm, a force of nature, but one that actively warps the very fabric of magic around it. Indeed, Elara confirmed. Conventional magical assault is not merely ineffective, it is actively detrimental. Any significant release of ambient magic near Ghidorah would simply be absorbed and rechanneled, strengthening it. Harry felt a fresh wave of despair. Then what do we do? Just wait for it to destroy everything? Let the Muggles see it? The statute will be utterly shattered. "That is precisely why I am here," Elara said, her gaze steady. "While direct magical confrontation is futile, there are unconventional solutions. The ancient texts speak of Ghidorah's vulnerability not to magic, but to resonance. A specific frequency, or a massive, coordinated countersurge of elemental energy, could potentially overcharge its core, disrupting its energetic equilibrium." "Resonance," Hermione repeated, her brow furrowing in thought. "Like a harmonic frequency that destabilizes its energy field?" "Precisely," Elara affirmed. "Or, alternatively, a surge so immense and so perfectly synchronized that it overwhelms its capacity to absorb and redirect. The texts refer to it as the anthem of the earth, or the heartbeat of the sky, archaic terms for what we might understand as a specific, resonant elemental manipulation." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "It would require a power source unlike any modern wizarding ritual and a coordination of magic on a global scale. It also requires the identification of this specific frequency, or anthem. Harry stared at her, overwhelmed by the scale of what she was suggesting. A global ritual? Coordinated magic? Elara, half the ministry is in shock. The other half is trying to keep this from the Muggles who just saw it. "Then we must unite them," Elara said simply, her gaze unwavering. "And more. We must locate the means to generate such power and the knowledge to unlock the specific resonance needed." The texts hint at ancient sites, places where the boundaries between elemental magic and the cosmic were once blurred. Places where beings like Ghidorah were, perhaps, confronted before. Shacklebolt cleared his throat, pushing a hand through his already disheveled dreadlocks. Elara believes the answers might lie within a forgotten branch of elemental ritual magic, specifically one involving manipulation of the atmosphere itself. She suggests a starting point in some obscure, almost mythical tome within the restricted section, and then a journey to a location mentioned only as the Whisper of Stone in those very same texts. Harry felt a spark of his old determination ignite, a familiar surge of adrenaline. This was terrifying, yes, but it was a plan. A crazy, impossible, utterly unprecedented plan, but a plan nonetheless. His wand might be useless, but his mind, his leadership, his willingness to step into the unknown, that still remained. He wasn't relying on spells, but on strategy, on unifying factions, on learning an entirely new paradigm. He looked at Hermione, who, despite the grimness of the situation, had a glint in her eye, already processing the intellectual challenge. Then he looked at Elara, whose calm, ancient wisdom offered a sliver of hope. So Harry said, his voice firm, "We need to find this Anthem of the Earth, this Whisper of Stone. And we need to learn how to play it before Ghidorah decides to grace us with another performance." Elara's lips quirked in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Exactly, Mr. Potter. And time, I assure you, is not on our side. Ghidorah does not slumber long when its hunger is roused. The next manifestation will likely be even more devastating. We must begin immediately. I've already prepared a preliminary translation of the relevant passages. It's dense, esoteric, and speaks of a power beyond our modern understanding of magic. Are you prepared to delve into secrets that even the most daring researchers in the Department of Mysteries rarely approach?" Harry met her gaze, a new kind of resolve settling in his heart. "After today, Elara, I'm prepared for anything." The ground still rumbled, a low, guttural vibration that was becoming the new pulse of England. King Ghidorah, a golden shadow against the bruised sky, had not departed. It lingered, a malevolent storm cloud-given form, its three heads occasionally lashing out with bursts of electrical fury that tore further rents in the landscape and shattered the remaining composure of the wizarding world. Harry felt the tremor in his bones, a dull ache that resonated with the gnawing helplessness in his gut. The familiar comfort of his wand, usually an extension of his will, now felt like a useless twig. He stood in a hastily erected, heavily warded, but still temporary ministry annex somewhere deep beneath the abandoned Quidditch World Cup grounds. It was meant to be impenetrable, a last bastion, yet he could still feel the distant thrum of Ghidorah's power, a disruptive static that made his scar prickle uncomfortably. Hermione, pale but resolute, was already poring over ancient scrolls and arcane diagrams spread across a reinforced, magically enlarged table. Elara Vance, her eyes holding an unnerving blend of urgency and ancient sorrow, gestured towards a shimmering projection formed by her wand. It depicted not a creature, but a complex energy signature, crackling with golden light. "It's not just a creature," Harry, Elara said, her voice soft, but sharp enough to cut through the ambient hum of emergency spells. "Ghidorah is a living conductor, a nexus of atmospheric and cosmic energy. Its lightning isn't merely an attack, it's a constant discharge, a disruption field that fundamentally warps magical resonance." Harry frowned. Magical resonance? What does that even mean? Magic, in its purest form, relies on subtle energy currents, on intention and alignment with the fabric of reality, Hermione explained without looking up, her finger tracing a diagram of ley lines. Ghidorah's mere presence is a discordant chord in that symphony. It's like trying to sing an intricate aria while someone is smashing cymbals next to your ear. You lose your pitch, your timing, your very voice. Precisely, Elara confirmed, her gaze flicking between the projection and Harry. And that's why direct magical assault is futile. You're trying to fight a thunderstorm with a sparkler. Your spells dissipate, absorbed or scattered by its electromagnetic field, like trying to apparate through a massive anti-apparition jinx, but on a cosmic scale. A cold dread settled in Harry's stomach. A cosmic scale. His biggest challenge before this had been Voldemort, a powerful wizard, yes, but still bound by the rules of their world. Ghidorah broke all the rules. So, what can we do? He pressed, his voice taut with frustration. You said there might be a way, Elara. Something about elemental manipulation. Elara nodded, her expression grim. Our ancient texts, particularly those from civilizations that predated the modern statute, speak of Titan kind. Not all were benevolent, and some, like the Golden Demise, were forces of pure destruction. They weren't creatures to be fought, but forces to be redirected or overwhelmed by their own nature. She tapped the shimmering projection. Ghidorah's core power is derived from atmospheric electricity. Think of it as a living, breathing storm. Trying to dispel a storm is pointless. But you can ground it, or overcharge it, or redirect its energy against itself. Hermione suddenly gasped, pointing to a frayed, leather-bound tome. Here, the Song of Aeolus and the Dragon of Three Storms. It speaks of resonant frequencies. Not a counterspell, but a mirror spell. A magical amplification of its own element, but delivered with such purity and scale that it forces a feedback loop. Harry felt a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by the enormity of the task. A mirror spell? A feedback loop? Hermione, Elara, what are we talking about? How do you even begin to do something like that? The texts describe a harmonic convergence, Elara explained, her voice hushed. It's not a single spell, Harry. It's a coordinated surge of specific elemental magic, not fire or water, but pure, raw atmospheric energy, channeled and focused to match Ghidorah's unique electrical signature. It would require hundreds, perhaps thousands, of highly skilled wizards and witches working in perfect synchronicity to generate a magical output of unprecedented scale. To overcharge it, Hermione whispered, her eyes wide with understanding. Like connecting a single light bulb to the national grid. The system simply can't handle that much power. It collapses in on itself. Harry stared at them, the pieces clicking into place, forming a terrifyingly clear picture. Thousands of wizards? In perfect synchronicity? That's not just a spell, that's a magical orchestra. Precisely, Elara said. Each wizard would act as an individual instrument, contributing to a collective magical output. The conductor would need to possess exceptional magical control and the ability to amplify the collective will, guiding the energy. A wizard of immense personal power with a natural affinity for elemental forces, or at least a highly refined ability to channel. Harry felt their gazes settle on him. He knew what they were implying. His own magical core, frequently described as potent and untamed, often manifested with a raw, almost elemental force when he was pushed to his limits. But thousands? That was a leap he hadn't considered. But how do we get thousands of wizards to do anything, let alone coordinate a ritual of this scale? Harry demanded, pushing a hand through his already messy hair. The ministry is in chaos. People are terrified, panicking. Half the population is still huddled in emergency shelters, and the other half is trying to figure out how to stop the sky from falling. That, Harry, is where your new role begins, Elara said, a subtle challenge in her eyes. You're not just an Auror anymore. You are the boy who lived, the vanquisher of Voldemort. People will listen to you, even if they're terrified. Especially if they're terrified. But this isn't just a matter of fighting. This is about convincing an entire world to unite, to perform a magic they've never conceived of, against a foe they cannot comprehend, Harry countered, pacing the small, warded room. And the Statute of Secrecy? How do we coordinate thousands of wizards without exposing magic to the Muggle world? Ghidorah is already doing a damn good job of that. He gestured wildly towards the ceiling, where the faint rumbles continued. Half of Dartmoor is probably flattened. Muggles have seen something. Hermione bit her lip. We'll have to consider controlled breaches, minimal exposure, perhaps even localized memory charms on a scale never before attempted. But the alternative? She trailed off, glancing at the projected image of Ghidorah's power signature. The alternative is global catastrophe, Harry. The complete collapse of the statute and, quite possibly, the end of everything. Harry stopped pacing, his gaze hardening. The jaded confidence he'd carried since the war had been utterly stripped away. This wasn't a battle fought with dueling spells and strategic apparition. This was something ancient, primal, and utterly indifferent to the squabbles of humanity. It required a complete reevaluation of everything he knew. So, global, multi-faction scale, Harry murmured, testing the words on his tongue. He thought of Kingsley, undoubtedly overwhelmed. He thought of the various wizarding nations, squabbling over trade agreements and international Quidditch regulations. He thought of the pureblood families who still distrusted Muggleborns, the factions who championed different magical ideologies. He even thought of the former Death Eaters, who, while imprisoned or under strict watch, still possessed immense magical power. "We need everyone," Harry declared, the words ringing with a new, weary authority. Every wizard, every witch, capable of channeling significant power. The Ministry, of course. The Aurors, the Unspeakables, the Order of the Phoenix Remnants. But also powerful independent witches and wizards. Even those who might have once been our enemies, if they can be trusted to stand against this. He gestured again at the sky, at the invisible titan that was slowly tearing their world apart. Elara's eyes glinted with a flicker of approval. A radical thought, Harry, but perhaps a necessary one. This threat transcends old grievances. It is existential. "It's insane," Hermione said, but there was a tremor of reluctant agreement in her voice. "Trying to unite factions that have been at odds for centuries. Convincing them to participate in a ritual they've never heard of, let alone understood. And all while a three-headed dragon is tearing up the countryside. Insane or not, it's the only option we have," Harry stated, a new resolve settling in his features. He looked at Hermione, then at Elara. "So, the plan. First, we need to gather as much information as possible on this harmonic convergence. Specifics. The exact frequencies, the timing, the sequence. Second, we need to identify potential conductors and amplifiers, though I have a grim suspicion who the primary one will be." He met Elara's gaze. "And third, we need to start reaching out. Kingsley needs to be on board immediately. Then, we prepare to make some very uncomfortable alliances." He paused, a map of the British Isles, now crisscrossed with ominous red marks indicating Ghidorah's damage, shimmering on another projection. "This isn't just about saving England. Ghidorah isn't going to stop here. This is about saving the world, both magical and Muggle. And if that means I have to stand in front of every suspicious pureblood family, every jaded rogue wizard, and every terrified ministry official and convince them to trust me, to trust us, then that's what I'll do." He felt a different kind of power stirring within him, not the lightning-fast reflexes of a duelist, but the heavy, deliberate weight of leadership. It wasn't glorious, it was terrifying. But it was his. "Where do we start, Elara?" Harry asked, his voice firm, his eyes fixed on the map of a crumbling world. "Who is the first person we need to convince that the impossible is our only hope?" The air thrummed with a new, terrifying rhythm. Not the familiar crackle of Ghidorah's lightning, but the sickening thud-thud-thud of distant explosions, the frantic pulse of emergency sirens echoing from the unseen Muggle towns beyond the ward lines. Dartmoor, once a battlefield of a different kind, was now a staging ground for humanity's last stand. The Quidditch Stadium was a skeletal ruin, its remaining metal scaffolding twisted into grotesque abstract art, but its devastation paled compared to the reports flooding into the temporary Ministry Command Center. Bath had been hit. Exeter was struggling under impossible atmospheric pressure. Satellite images, smuggled in by a desperate Elara Vance from some obscure Department of Mysteries contact, showed golden scars ripping across the very fabric of the English landscape, not just impact craters, but vast swathes of land where vegetation had been incinerated, rivers boiled dry, and structures atomized by an energy beyond comprehension. The Statute of Secrecy wasn't just crumbling, it was being vaporized by Ghidorah's casual reign of terror. Harry watched a shimmering projection of one such image, a formerly verdant valley now a blackened canyon, still smoking, and felt a chill deeper than any Dementor's kiss. This wasn't a battle against a dark wizard, it was a desperate struggle against a natural disaster given sentient, malevolent form. His wand felt like a useless stick of kindling in his hand. They're calling it atmospheric anomaly, unprecedented storm systems, solar flare activity affecting the upper atmosphere, Hermione reported, her voice tight with contained fury as she pored over Muggle news feeds. But the patterns, it's tracking human population centers, Harry. It's feeding on the fear, on the disruption. It's not just random. It's a dominant alpha predator, Elara Vance interjected, her silver eyes glinting in the dim light of the bunker. She pointed a slender finger at the holographic projection of Ghidorah, suspended above a detailed map of southern England. It senses large energy signatures, whether they be electrical grids, a bustling city, or a concentrated magical presence. The fear is a byproduct, a seasoning, not the main course. It's the power it craves. The pressure to act was immense. Kingsley Shacklebolt, Minister for Magic, looked every one of his years and then some. His rich robes seemed to hang heavier on his shoulders, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a haunted grimness. He had convened an emergency assembly of every high-ranking ministry official, every department head, every powerful wizard and witch he could summon. The room was packed with anxious faces, some pale with fear, others flushed with impotent rage. Aurors have confirmed 2 more breaches of the statute this morning, Kingsley announced, his voice booming despite his weariness. Direct Muggle sightings. Unavoidable. One family in Somerset managed to film ahead of the beast through a lightning storm, thinking it was some kind of new military drone. It's everywhere. We're out of options. Our conventional wards are failing, our offensive charms are absorbed, our strongest defensive spells are shorting out or disintegrating. He swept his gaze across the room, meeting the eyes of terrified witches and wizards. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Elara Vance have presented a unconventional solution. It is our only hope. I give the floor to them. A ripple of murmurs, skeptical glances, and outright grumbling went through the crowd. Potter? He's a fine Auror, but what could he know about this? Unconventional? Minister, we need magic. This is lunacy. Run. Evacuate. Harry stepped forward, Hermione at his side, Elara a silent sentinel behind them. He took a deep breath, the stale air of the bunker tasting metallic. He looked at Kingsley, then at the assembled wizards, many of whom had fought alongside him against Voldemort. This was different. This wasn't about good versus evil, but about existence versus annihilation. I know this sounds impossible, Harry began, his voice firm, echoing slightly in the tense silence. But we are facing something that does not operate within the framework of our established magical understanding. Ghidorah isn't a creature of dark magic. It's a force of nature, a living electrical storm, a conductor of vast atmospheric energy. Hermione stepped up, her eyes blazing with an academic intensity that usually preceded a brilliant exposition. Elara has uncovered ancient texts, historical accounts that predate even the International Statute of Secrecy. These entities, Kaiju as they are known in some forgotten dialects, are not susceptible to direct magical assault because their energetic signature is too vast, too raw. Think of it like trying to boil an ocean with a single heating charm. Ghidorah thrives on chaos and energy, Elara added, her voice a low, resonant hum. It absorbs and redirects magical output, just as it does atmospheric electricity. Our spells are not attacking it, they are feeding it. But its very nature as a conductor is also its weakness. It can be overcharged. More murmurs. Overcharged? With what? An elderly witch from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement scoffed. A million stunning spells? No, Harry said, shaking his head. With a resonant frequency. With its own energy. Elara's research indicates that if we can create a powerful enough, harmonically tuned magical surge, one that mimics Ghidorah's elemental signature, its lightning, its gravitic manipulation, we could effectively turn its own power against it. Overload its internal systems. It's like tuning an instrument, Hermione clarified, seeing the blank stares. If you hit the right frequency with enough power, you can shatter glass. If we hit Ghidorah's frequency, with enough magical energy, we can disrupt its energetic stability. It won't be a spell, but a massive, synchronized magical resonance. And how, pray tell, are we to achieve this resonant frequency? Percy Weasley, looking remarkably unruffled amidst the chaos, asked skeptically, pushing his spectacles up his nose. "Are we to sing at it? Wave our wands in a strange dance." Harry met his gaze, then swept his eyes across the room. "We need everyone. Every powerful witch and wizard willing to stand. We need to channel our magic not into offensive spells, but into a single, focused, incredibly potent energy wave. Imagine 1,000 wands, each contributing to a unified purpose, not as individuals, but as a single, immense magical conduit." The ancient texts speak of such a ritual, Elara confirmed. A chorus of power. It requires not just strength, but absolute synchronization and almost meditative unity of intent. The room erupted. "Impossible. Wizards are individualists by nature. Too risky. What if we fail? We'll just be feeding it more power. What if we don't try?" Harry retorted, his voice cutting through the din. He strode to the holographic map and gestured at the scorched land. "This is what happens if we don't. The statute is already gone. Every minute we delay, more muggles die, more of our world is destroyed. Running isn't an option. Hiding isn't an option. We fight. And this, as impossible as it sounds, is the only way we know how." Kingsley slammed a fist on the table. "Silence. Harry is right. Our standard protocols have failed. Our best Aurors have been rendered useless. We are facing an existential threat that defies our understanding. And if Harry Potter, who has faced down the darkest wizard of our age, tells me this is our only chance, then I will hear him out. I will back him." He then looked at Harry, his gaze firm. "But this is not a suggestion, Harry. This is a command. We will mobilize every available magical resource. You will lead this operation. Percy, you will coordinate logistics. Minerva McGonagall will oversee the training of the younger, less experienced wizards for this chorus. And the Auror office will establish perimeter security and evacuation routes as best they can." A tense silence descended, heavier than before. The officials exchanged worried glances, but the minister's word was law, and Harry's reputation, despite the absurdity of the plan, still commanded a reluctant respect. The next 2 days were a blur of frantic activity, a forced unity born of desperation. The ministry facilities, already stretched to their breaking point, were transformed into a magical training ground. Witches and wizards from every department, every walk of life, were taught the complex, synchronized wand movements and the focused mental intent required for the chorus of power. It wasn't about power spells, it was about resonance. About feeling the flow of magic, guiding it, uniting it. Harry moved like a man possessed, directing, encouraging, even occasionally demonstrating. He found himself not just instructing, but inspiring. He worked alongside Hermione, who tirelessly refined the harmonic patterns and calculated the precise timing needed, and Elara, who provided cryptic but invaluable insights into Ghidorah's energy signature. "It needs to be a unified hum, Harry," Elara had explained, holding her hands out as if feeling a distant vibration. Not a choir of individual voices, but a single, immense tone. Beyond the ministry's walls, the world continued to burn. Ghidorah seemed to be growing stronger, its golden lightning bolts striking with greater frequency and destructive force. London was being evacuated. The news channels, no longer able to hide the sheer scale of the phenomenon, were broadcasting images of impossible storms and strange, shimmering energy flares, trying to explain it away with increasingly desperate scientific theories. The veil of secrecy was threadbare, shredded by the claws of the three-headed king. As the second day drew to a close, a sense of grim determination settled over the assembled magical forces. They were exhausted, terrified, but ready. They had practiced until their arms ached and their minds reeled. The target location, a secluded valley on the edge of Dartmoor known for its strong natural ley lines, was prepared with subtle wards to help channel the immense magical surge. Harry stood on a makeshift platform, facing thousands of witches and wizards, their faces illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. Hermione was beside him, her hand gripping his arm in silent support. Elara Vance stood a few paces back, her silhouette against the rising storm clouds in the distance. Ghidorah was a distant, pulsing golden star against the bruised, angry sky, but its presence was felt in every drop of moisture, every thrum of energy in the air. "This is it." Harry's voice cut through the anxious murmurs, amplified by a sonorous charm. "Everything we have. For our world. For the Muggle world. For everyone." He raised his wand, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. "We meet the golden demise with the golden thunder." A roar went up from the crowd, a mix of fear and fervent hope. As the first drops of rain began to fall, cold and stinging, Harry saw the flashes of distant lightning. Ghidorah was coming, and they were ready. The time for preparation was over. The time for the last, desperate gamble had arrived. The air vibrated, not just with the raw power of Ghidorah's lightning, but with the focused intent of hundreds of wands. Harry stood at the nexus of it all, a beacon of grim determination amidst the chaos of Dartmoor. The hastily erected wards, strengthened by every available ministry resource and even a few rogue, surprisingly eager dark wizards, shimmered under the constant barrage of golden electricity. They were buying time, barely. Ghidorah, a titanic silhouette against the bruised, storm-racked sky, unleashed another torrent of electricity from its central head. The bolts arced, snapping across the landscape, vaporizing sections of the temporary ministry command center, tearing apart ancient trees and carving molten channels into the earth. The screams of evacuating Muggles, now a distant memory, were replaced by the desperate incantations of wizards struggling to hold the line. "It's getting stronger." Hermione's voice, amplified by a sonorous charm, cut through the din. She was a whirlwind of motion, monitoring arcane runic arrays carved into the earth around their central ritual circle, correcting energy flows with precise flicks of her wand. Sweat plastered strands of hair to her temples, but her eyes, behind smoke-smudged spectacles, burned with fierce concentration. The atmospheric energy, it's like a magnet for it. Elara Vance, cloaked figure unperturbed by the storm, stood opposite Harry within the circle. Her hand was raised, palm facing the sky, drawing patterns of swirling arcane light that seemed to mirror the very structure of the storm above. "It is not merely a magnet, Hermione," she explained, her voice eerily calm despite the proximity of death. "It is the storm. Ghidorah is the conductor. We must resonate with that frequency, then amplify it beyond its capacity. Overcharge it, like a circuit overloaded." Harry took a deep breath, the metallic tang of ozone filling his lungs. He could feel the magic in the air, a raw, primal force so unlike the structured spells he'd always known. Elara had spent the last 2 days explaining the ancient ritual, a forgotten branch of elemental manipulation that didn't seek to control nature, but to flow with it, to guide and amplify existing forces. Their plan wasn't to fight Ghidorah's lightning, but to make it too much for Ghidorah to handle. "Ready the final phase," Harry roared, his own voice magically amplified, cutting through the thunder. He pointed his wand, not at Ghidorah, but at the earth before him, the shimmering lines of a vast, complex runic circle now glowing faintly. This was the resonant heart Elara had spoken of, a focal point for the collective power of hundreds of wizards. Around the Dartmoor Basin, thousands of feet away, smaller circles blazed to life. Aurors, unspeakables, even former Death Eaters Harry had grudgingly convinced to join, all stood ready. They were the conduits, their combined magical energy flowing through ley lines Elara had painstakingly mapped, converging on Harry's position. "Remember the rhythm," Hermione shouted, her voice laced with urgency. "It's not about raw power, it's about harmony. Breathe with the storm. Channel the wind, the rain, the earth itself." Harry closed his eyes for a split second, recalling Elara's training. He reached out, not with his wand, but with his mind, with his very core. He felt the cold sting of the rain, the vibration of the earth under his boots, the electric crackle in the air. He wasn't casting a spell, he was becoming a part of the environment. Then, Elara gave the signal. "Now, release your anchors. Let the current flow." A cascade of emerald light erupted from the surrounding circles, shimmering waves of pure magic rushing towards the central basin. Harry gritted his teeth, the force of it nearly buckling his knees. He was holding back a dam of power, waiting for the precise moment. Ghidorah sensed the shift. Its three heads shrieked in unison, a sound that tore at the very fabric of reality, shaking the ground and disorienting wizards across the plain. The golden lightning intensified, forming a whirling vortex of destruction around its body, seemingly attempting to overload their own ritual before it could even begin. "It's reacting," Hermione gasped, scrambling to recalibrate a flickering runic array. "The feedback loop is immense." Elara, however, seemed to thrive in the chaotic energy. Her eyes, usually veiled, now glowed with an ancient light. "Perfect. The more it resists, the more energy it draws, the easier it is to overcharge." She turned to Harry, her voice clear and resonant. "Harry, the conduit is ready. Connect. Let the world's breath become its poison." This was it. The moment of truth. Harry took a deep breath, picturing a vast, invisible river of magic flowing into him, through him. He saw the network of wizards, the ley lines, the storm itself. He was no longer Harry Potter, or he was a focal point, a living bridge between magic and the primordial forces of the earth. He raised his wand, not as a weapon, but as a conductor. He didn't point it at Ghidorah. He pointed it upwards, into the very heart of the storm where Ghidorah hovered. Accio Resonantia, he bellowed, a new spell, or perhaps an ancient incantation, forged from Elara's forgotten lore and his own burgeoning understanding. The emerald energy, now a roaring river of light, surged from his wand. It wasn't a focused beam, but a wave, a shimmering, vibrating frequency that spread through the storm clouds like a ripple. It met Ghidorah's golden lightning, not clashing, but intermingling. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, the golden lightning around Ghidorah began to waver. It didn't dissipate, but pulsed erratically, as if struggling against an invisible current. The creature's shrieks intensified, growing more frenzied, more pained. "It's working," Hermione cried, tears streaming down her face, whether from the wind or emotion. Harry couldn't tell. "We're disrupting its resonance with the atmosphere. It can't process the energy." Ghidorah thrashed, its three heads whipping wildly, desperate to break free from the invisible bonds. Its lightning, instead of striking outwards, began to arc inwards, lashing at its own massive scales. The golden energy, once its weapon, was turning against it, feeding into a destructive feedback loop. The sky above them, once a maelstrom of golden and gray, began to shift. Where Ghidorah's lightning had dominated, now streaks of emerald light flashed, dancing around the creature's immense form, a mirror image of the power they were channeling. Harry felt an incredible strain. The magic was immense, threatening to tear him apart. He felt the pain of hundreds of wizards, their wills converging on him, their exhaustion, their hope. He could hear Elara's voice in his mind. "Guide it, Harry. Guide the overload. Think of a breaker switch. It cannot hold infinite power." He pushed harder, drawing on something deeper than magic, deeper than courage. He drew on the memory of every sacrifice, every friend lost, every battle won. He drew on the silent promise to protect not just the magical world, but both worlds. With a final, gargantuan surge, the emerald light pulsed, brighter than 1,000 suns, completely enveloping Ghidorah. The three heads shrieked one last, agonizing roar, a sound of absolute, cosmic pain. Then, an explosion. Not a sound, but a deafening burst of pure light, a silent, concussive wave that flattened trees miles away and threw Harry violently backwards. For a moment, the sky was utterly white. When his vision returned, through ringing ears and a throbbing head, the storm was gone. The clouds had parted, revealing a sliver of pale, shocked blue sky. And Ghidorah. Ghidorah was falling. Its immense golden body, no longer crackling with electricity, plummeted from the sky like a broken gargoyle, crashing into the desolate Dartmoor landscape with a seismic impact that rattled the earth for miles. A cloud of dust and debris erupted into the air, obscuring the sight of the fallen titan. Silence. A profound, aching silence descended over the battlefield, broken only by the distant groans of injured wizards and the heavy breathing of those who had survived. Harry lay on the ground, gasping, every muscle screaming in protest. Hermione was beside him instantly, checking him over with frantic concern. Elara, though still standing, leaned heavily on her staff, her eyes closed, a faint glow still lingering around her. Is it done?" Hermione whispered, her voice hoarse. Harry pushed himself up, his eyes fixed on the dust cloud. The magic in the air felt normal again. The oppressive, disruptive aura was gone. "I think so," he said, his voice raw. We overcharged it. Forced it to discharge all that energy. It's inert. For now." A shudder ran through him. Inert. Not dead. Just inert. Elara had warned him. These creatures weren't like Voldemort. They weren't evil. They just were. And their defeat was merely a cessation of their destructive activity, a temporary return to dormancy. He looked around. The Dartmoor plains were scarred beyond recognition. Huge swathes of land were incinerated, craters pocked the earth. The Quidditch World Cup stadium was a twisted wreck, barely recognizable. But the Statute of Secrecy, though stretched to its absolute breaking point, had held. Ministry teams were already operating in, ready to deploy hundreds of obliviators to the surrounding Muggle towns to rewrite the memories of the freak storm and mass hallucinations. Harry felt a strange mix of triumph and exhaustion. He had faced Voldemort, manipulated fate, and saved the world countless times. But this was different. He hadn't just relied on his wand or a powerful spell. He had embraced an entirely new understanding of magic, of cosmic forces. He had led, not by blasting, but by orchestrating, by understanding. He had learned humility, realizing that even the most powerful wizard was but a small spark against the vastness of nature's true titans. He saw ministry officials, looking shell-shocked but relieved, beginning to emerge from what remained of their command tents. They would have a mountain of work ahead of them. Rebuilding, obliviating, explaining away the impossible. Elara opened her eyes, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. "You did well, Harry Potter," she said, her voice soft but profound. "You did more than cast a spell. You opened a door." "A door?" Harry asked, wincing as he stood fully, shaking off Hermione's concerned hands. To a greater understanding, Elara explained, her gaze drifting towards the horizon, where the dust cloud from Ghidorah's fall was slowly settling. Ghidorah is but one of many. One of the Titans, as the Muggles sometimes call them. Ancient forces. This world, your world, is far older, far more complex than your ministry would have you believe. Harry's blood ran cold. One of many? His comfortable world, which had just barely survived its first brush with a cosmic entity, now threatened to unravel entirely. Hermione, ever practical, stepped forward. "Elara, what are you saying? Are there others like Ghidorah? Hidden here on Earth?" Elara finally looked at them, her expression grave. "Some are. Others slumber elsewhere, awakened by shifting energies, by the wounds we inflict upon the planet, or by certain catalysts." She paused, her gaze lingering on Harry. "You showed them what wizardkind is capable of today, Harry. You may have saved the world, yes, but you also made us visible. To all of them." Harry looked back at the settling dust, at the dormant Titan. He had defeated Ghidorah. But in doing so, had he inadvertently signaled Wizardkin's presence to an entire pantheon of sleeping giants? His new heroic identity felt less like a crown and more like a heavy burden. The peace he had sought at the Quidditch World Cup seemed like a naive dream from another lifetime. The golden thunder had ceased, but the whispers of what lay beyond had just begun. And Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the Auror, now knew his fight was far from over. It had only just truly begun.